My name is Jessica Stewart, and I'm 29 years old. If you were to ask people around me to describe me in one word, most would probably say reliable. Not glamorous, not exciting, not the life of the party, just reliable. And for a long time, I thought that was enough. I worked in tech, a steady job with decent pay and great benefits. I saved diligently with a plan. Our plan, or so I thought. Every extra dollar went into a high yield savings account earmarked for a down payment on a house. I believed in building step by step for a future that lasted. My boyfriend Ryan was the opposite of me in nearly every way. He worked in marketing, slick, charming, imagined. His whole world revolved around appearances the clothes, the cars, the dinners at overpriced restaurants. He called it living in the moment. I called it burning tomorrow to keep today on fire. Still, I told myself that opposites balance each other, that his wildness gave our life color, and my stability gave it a foundation. I ignored the red flags, convincing myself they were just quirks of ambition. But deep down, I knew there was a fault line running beneath us. The crack widened at his company's annual gala. The event was held in one of those ostentatious hotel ballrooms, dripping with excess crystal chandeliers the size of small cars, gold leaf on the walls, champagne glasses that never seemed to empty, the air buzzed with perfume, and the low hum of conversations about quarterly earnings, branding, and market shares. I walked in beside Ryan wearing my one good evening dress, the navy silk that always made me feel both elegant and out of place. Ryan thrived there. He flitted from group to group, shaking hands, laughing too loudly, basking in the attention. I stood by his side, clutching a glass of champagne. I didn't want trying not to drown in the feeling that I was the misplaced puzzle piece in a box full of glittering ones. That's when Adrian appeared. He was one of Ryan's colleagues. Though colleagues seemed generous, Adrian was more of a showman than a professional. Swagger in a tailored suit, smug grin permanently etched on his face. He bragged loudly about his brand new BMW M3, which, as he made sure everyone knew, was parked just outside under the ballroom lights. I noticed how he said brand new but never mentioned the word lease. As the group swirled around in their cocktail chatter, one of Ryan's friends nudged him and said, "Ryan, didn't you get Jessica a new car too?" The room turned toward us. Ryan's hand tightened around his glass, and then he glanced at me, his smile fading into something sharper, mocking. "Jessica, tell him about the house you're saving for," he said. It wasn't pride in his voice, it was performance. His tone was drenched with disdain, as though my stability were a punchline he wanted everyone to laugh at. I forced a small smile, starting to explain how I'd been saving for a down payment. But before I could finish, Ryan cut me off with a dismissive wave. "No, not that," he said with a chuckle. "Tell them about your dream car." My stomach twisted. I didn't have a dream car. I never had. My dream was a home, a place we could call ours, but the silence that followed my pause was damning. I saw Adrian's smirk widen. He leaned in, slinging an arm casually around Ryan's shoulder as if we were all old friends. Then he gestured toward the grand windows where his BMW gleamed under the lights. "See, that's the problem," Adrian said loudly enough for the whole circle to hear. "Some people talk about responsibility. Others know how to actually take care of a woman. Jessica, why don't I show you what a real car feels like?" A ripple of laughter broke out among the group. I felt my face flush, but not with embarrassment. With fury, my blood went cold. I turned to Ryan, praying for him to stand up for me, to shut Adrian down, to do something. Instead, Ryan smirked. He tilted his head toward me, his voice dripping with condescension. "Don't be dramatic, Jessica," he said. "Honestly, sometimes you're just an embarrassment." The word hit harder than a slap. And then, with every eye in the room still on us, he set his glass down, took Adrian's hand like they were sealing some ridiculous deal, and strolled out of the ballroom with him. Laughter filled the silence he left behind. I stood frozen in place, clutching my champagne glass so tightly I thought it might shatter. My ears rang, my throat ached, but no tears came. I was a statue in the middle of a golden room, mocked, dismissed, humiliated. Finally, I set the glass down on the nearest table, turned on my heels, and walked out. The cold night air hit me like a slap, sharp and cleansing. I didn't wait for a rideshare inside. I stood on the curb, arms wrapped around myself, as if to hold together the pieces that were threatening to scatter. In that moment, something inside me shifted. I didn't know it yet, but the Jessica who walked into that ballroom wasn't the same one who walked out. And Ryan had no idea the cost of what he'd just thrown away. When I got home from the gala that night, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even pour myself a glass of wine to dull the ache. Instead, I opened the closet, pulled out 2 large cardboard boxes, and began packing Ryan's life away. Shirts first, then shoes. His ridiculous collection of branded belts and watches that never matched the price tag of his bank account. Piece by piece, I folded and stacked them with surgical precision. I didn't pause to breathe, didn't allow myself the indulgence of hesitation. My silence was my shield, my weapon. The engagement ring I had bought months ago, tucked away in the corner of my sock drawer, stared at me like a wound. I had imagined giving it to him during a quiet dinner at home, the 2 of us laughing over takeout, me slipping it across the table like a secret meant only for us. Instead, I placed a small velvet box inside a locked safe, out of sight, out of reach, a forgotten promise buried under cold steel. By the time the clock struck 2, the apartment was stripped of him. Every trace of Ryan had been neatly contained in brown boxes, stacked by the front door like luggage waiting to be carried into oblivion. I sat on the couch staring at them, feeling nothing. No tears, no rage, just the kind of hollow certainty that comes when you finally see the truth without its disguise. It was nearly 4 a.m. when the keys scraped the lock. Ryan stumbled in smelling of cologne, champagne, and gasoline from Adrienne's car. He was laughing when he pushed the door open, his tie loosened, his shirt half untucked. The laughter died when his eyes landed on the boxes. "What the hell is this?" he demanded, dropping his jacket onto the arm of the couch. I didn't answer. I simply stood, lifted one box, and placed it closer to him like a quiet invitation. "You're seriously doing this?" His voice rose, incredulous, because I went for a ride. "You're overreacting, Jessica." I stayed silent, the kind of silence that strips power from words. He ran a hand through his hair, pacing like a trapped animal. "You always do this. You twist everything to make me the villain. I wanted you to loosen up to live a little, and you turn it into betrayal. God, you're suffocating sometimes." Still, I said nothing. I only walked into the kitchen, picked up a scarf he'd left draped over the counter, and tucked it into the top of another box. Ryan slammed his fist against the wall. The sound reverberated through the room, but I didn't flinch. "You know what?" He spat, his face twisting. "Fine, you're right. This is for the best. You're boring, Jessica. Predictable. A placeholder. I need someone who actually understands life. Someone who doesn't measure it in spreadsheets and savings accounts." His words should have cut me open. Once they would have, but in that moment they felt weightless, like echoes bouncing off a wall that no longer belonged to him. "Adrienne gets it," Ryan continued, his voice sharpening. "He knows how to enjoy life. He doesn't need to save for some bland house in the suburbs. He actually knows how to live, and that's what I want, a real life, not whatever this is." He gestured wildly at the boxes at me, as if everything I represented was beneath him. I picked up the last box, pushed it toward him, and finally met his eyes. "You're right," I said, my voice even calm. "This is for the best." The words stunned him into silence. For once, Ryan had no retort. He grabbed a bag, stuffed a few things into it, and stormed toward the door. His final act of defiance was slamming it so hard a framed picture of us toppled from the wall, shattering across the hardwood floor. I stood there staring at the broken glass. The photo beneath it was of us at the beach 2 summers ago, laughing with the sun in our eyes. I bent down, picked up the picture, and slid it out of the cracked frame. Then, without ceremony, I dropped it into the trash. The silence that followed was deafening, but for the first time it didn't feel like a void. It felt like space room for something new, something untainted. That night I lay in bed alone, the empty space beside me colder than usual, but not unbearable. As I stared at the ceiling, I realized something profound. The Jessica who had been afraid to lose him no longer existed, and in her place was someone stronger, someone who finally understood that silence could be louder than any scream. The first few weeks after Ryan left were brutal. Everywhere I turned, there were reminders of him. The empty half of the closet, the coffee mug he always used, the dent in the couch where he sprawled out after work. At night, the silence pressed down on me like a weight. It wasn't the peaceful kind. It was the kind that reminded you of what was missing. But I had already made a choice. No calls, no texts, no weak moments. I blocked him on everything: his number, his social media, even his email. I cut ties with the friends who I knew would try to act as messengers. The silence that had once felt suffocating slowly began to transform into something else: a boundary, a sanctuary. And within that sanctuary, I started building again. The first step was practical. With the savings I'd been protecting for years, I put a down payment on a small 2-bedroom condo. It wasn't the house Ryan used to mock as boring suburban life, but it was mine. All mine. I remember signing the papers, the pen trembling slightly in my hand. The realtor slid the keys across the table, and when the metal touched my palm, a shiver ran through me. Not fear pride, quiet, steady pride. The condo was nothing extravagant. Cream-colored walls, modest kitchen, a balcony just big enough for 2 chairs. But every corner felt like possibility. I spent my evenings painting over those bland walls, choosing colors that reflected me. Deep forest green for the living room, soft gray for the bedroom, burnt orange accents in the kitchen. For the first time in years, every decision was mine alone. And then came the project that changed everything. For years, I had dreamed of starting a small side business: custom furniture. Not mass-produced pieces, but hand-built tables, shelves, chairs, things with character, with soul. While Ryan was around, I'd shelved the idea. He called it a cute hobby, something that would never go anywhere. But with him gone, the idea refused to stay buried. So I cleared out the garage of my new condo, set up a workbench, and bought my first batch of lumber. The smell of sawdust became my therapy. The rhythm of sanding, hammering, varnishing it grounded me. There was something intoxicating about shaping raw wood into something beautiful, useful, permanent. Each finished piece felt like a declaration. I am capable. I am enough. Late at night, when the world was quiet, I would run my fingers along the polished edge of a table or the smooth curve of a chair leg, and I would whisper to myself, I built this with my own hands. That mantra became my lifeline. Days turned into weeks, and the emptiness inside me began to fill, not with another person, but with purpose. My body grew stronger from the labor, my mind sharper from focusing on design. I even started going back to the gym, lifting weights, sweating out the ghosts of arguments that used to haunt me. Friends I hadn't seen in years re-entered my life. We met for coffee, for dinners, for quiet walks by the river. They looked at me with a mix of surprise and relief, as though they were meeting a version of me they had thought was lost forever. You seem lighter, one of them said one evening. And they were right. I was lighter, not because life had gotten easier, but because I had finally dropped the dead weight of someone who had never believed in me. Of course, the whispers still reached me. Mutual acquaintances couldn't resist gossip. Ryan and Adrian, they said, weren't exactly living the dream. The BMW Adrian flaunted so proudly leased, and the payments were suffocating him. Their nights of champagne and flash had turned into arguments over money. Adrienne was possessive, controlling everything Ryan used to accuse me of being. The irony was sharp, almost cruel. I didn't smile when I heard it. Not exactly. But there was a quiet satisfaction in knowing the life Ryan had chosen wasn't the paradise he imagined. It was a house of cards trembling, waiting for the right breeze to send it crashing down. Still, I didn't reach out. I didn't glow. I stayed in my sanctuary, building my tables, painting my walls, and letting the silence speak for me. One night, as I stood on my balcony watching the city lights flicker, I realized something profound. I wasn't just moving on. I was becoming someone new. Someone Ryan would never recognize, never deserve. And though I didn't know it then, the real test of that new strength was coming, because Ryan wasn't finished with me. Not yet. It started as whispers. At first I ignored them, bits of gossip filtering through, mutual acquaintances who still hadn't learned that I wanted nothing to do with Ryan's orbit. But the details began to stack piece by piece until they painted a picture I couldn't unsee. Ryan's new life was crumbling. Adrian, the man who once draped his arm over Ryan's shoulder while mocking me, wasn't the success story he pretended to be. The leased BMW that had sparkled outside the ballroom, the payments were strangling him. Their expensive dinners, weekend getaways, flashy social media posts, all of it was built on credit and bravado. The truth was simple. Adrian lived on borrowed shine, and the polish was wearing off. And Ryan, while Ryan wasn't thriving, he was shrinking. The same man who called me suffocating was now trapped in the web of Adrian's control. Friends whispered that Adrian had turned possessive, cutting Ryan off from people he cared about, belittling him for not being ambitious enough. The cruel irony wasn't lost on me. Ryan was tasting the very poison he once poured down my throat. I should have felt vindicated. Maybe a part of me did, but mostly I felt nothing. Just a quiet awareness that life has a way of balancing scales without my help. Still, the universe has a dark sense of humor. I heard from one friend, hesitant, almost embarrassed to bring it up, that Adrian's beloved BMW had been repossessed in broad daylight right outside their building. Ryan had been there watching as the car that symbolized everything he had chosen over me was hauled away on a tow truck. The image stuck in my mind. Ryan standing powerless on the sidewalk watching the machine that had cost me my dignity vanish on the back of another machine. And then the messages began. At first they were simple. A text from an unknown number. "Hey, how are you?" I deleted it. Then another. "Jessica, it's me. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I miss you." Then voicemails. The first time I heard his voice again, my stomach clenched. Not with longing, but with the jolt of remembering a language I no longer spoke. "Hey, Jessica. Look, I know you're angry. I get it. But I made a mistake. A huge mistake. He's not who I thought he was. I miss you. I miss us. Just call me back, please." I didn't. Days turned into weeks and the texts grew desperate. Long paragraphs, spilling excuses, apologies, promises. He tried every tactic. Nostalgia, guilt, charm. But I had built my silence into armor, and I refused to take it off. Still he kept pushing. When I blocked one number, another appeared. When I ignored the texts, he left voicemails. His voice grew more frantic each time. "Jessica, please just talk to me. You don't understand how bad things are. Jessica, you're the only person who ever believed in me. I was stupid. Please, I'll do anything." I sat in my condo listening to the faint buzz of my phone as the messages rolled in. And I felt powerful, not because I had the upper hand, but because I finally understood I didn't need to respond. Ryan had no place in the life I was building, but desperation doesn't fade quietly. One evening, as I was sanding down the edge of a coffee table in my garage workshop, I heard a knock at my front door, slow, heavy. For a moment, I froze, the sander buzzing in my hands. My heart raced with the kind of instinctive dread that comes when you know a ghost from your past has found its way back into your present. I turned off the sander, wiped my hands on a rag, and walked toward the door. Through the frosted glass, I saw his silhouette, shoulders hunched, hands shoved deep in his pockets, even in shadow. He looked smaller than I remembered. Ryan. I took a breath, steady and deliberate, and unlocked the door. When it swung open, I almost didn't recognize him. His clothes were wrinkled, his face, pale, eyes bloodshot. The smugness that once defined him had been replaced by something raw, desperate. "Jessica," he said, his voice breaking on my name. "Please just let me talk to you." The man who had once called me an embarrassment was now standing on my doorstep like a beggar. And for the first time in months, I realized this was the confrontation I had been waiting for. Ryan stood there on my doorstep, shoulders hunched, looking nothing like the man who once strutted through crowded ballrooms with a smirk. For a long moment, I just stared at him. The silence between us was thick, almost unbearable. But I wasn't the one squirming under it. He was leading. "Please, can I come in just for a minute? I don't know where else to go." I stepped outside instead, pulling the door shut behind me with a firm click. The latch echoed in the quiet night like a line being drawn. Ryan's eyes flicked to the closed door, then back to me. He swallowed hard. "I was stupid. I know that. Adrian, he's not who I thought he was. He's controlling, mean. Everything I thought you were, it's him. He tore me down, Jessica. He made me feel worthless." He ran a hand through his hair, and I noticed the tremble in his fingers. I thought I was trading up, trading boring stability for excitement, but it was all fake. I was an idiot. And now his voice cracked. "Now I've lost everything." I folded my arms, my face unreadable inside, my heartbeat steady like a drum of resolve. "I miss us," Ryan said desperately. "I miss the way you believed in me, the way you made life feel safe. I see it now, how good we had it. Please, Jessica, can we just start over?" "I'll change. I promise. I just want my life back." For a second, I almost pied him. Almost, but pity is not the same as love, and I no longer owed him either. I took a deep breath, meeting his bloodshot eyes. My voice when it came was calm, steady, unshakable. "You're right, Ryan," I said softly. "We were on different levels, but not the way you thought." He blinked confused. "You humiliated me in front of your friends. You called me an embarrassment. You threw me away for a shiny car and a man who lived on credit. That night, you didn't just walk out of that ballroom with Adrian. You buried the version of me who would have forgiven you." I stepped closer, lowering my voice until it cut like a blade. "The Jessica who would have begged you to stay, who would have blamed herself for your cruelty. She's gone. Dead. You killed her. And in her place I built someone stronger, someone who doesn't need you." Ryan's mouth opened, but no words came out. His shoulders sagged, his face hollow. "I have a new life now," I continued. "One that's stable, quiet. And mine. A life you mocked. A life you told me was worthless. But it's the life I love. And you—" I paused, letting the silence finish the sentence. "You have no place in it." For the first time since I'd known him, Ryan looked small. Not just desperate small, like a shadow shrinking against the light. I turned, placed my hand on the doorknob, and pulled the door open. Before stepping inside, I looked back one final time. "You wanted to live in the moment, Ryan. Well, here's your moment. Savor it." Then I closed the door. The sound of the latch sliding shut behind me was final, satisfying. I didn't press my ear to the wood to hear if he lingered. I didn't watch from the window to see if he walked away. It didn't matter. For the first time in years, his presence, his entire existence was irrelevant to me. Inside my condo, the scent of sawdust still lingered from the table I'd been working on earlier. I ran my hand along its polished edge, the wood worn beneath my palm, solid, permanent. I realized then that I hadn't just rebuilt my life, I had rebuilt myself. And unlike Ryan, I was built to last. The morning after Ryan showed up at my door, the world felt different. Not because anything dramatic had happened. No fireworks, no final screaming match, no tears. But because of what didn't happen for the first time in years, I had faced him without fear, without hesitation, without the weight of needing his approval. And I had closed the door literally, figuratively, completely. It was as though my entire apartment exhaled with me. The air felt lighter, the silence warmer, no longer a reminder of absence, but a presence in itself, my peace. I poured myself coffee, carried it to the balcony, and sat with my legs tucked beneath me, watching the sun rise over the city. The world was awake and moving, but for the first time, I didn't feel like I was waiting for life to begin. I was already living it. The condo no longer felt like just four walls. It felt like mine. Every paint stroke, every nail hammered into wood, every piece of furniture I had crafted with my hands carried my fingerprint. My life was stitched into this place, steady and unshakable. Orders for my furniture business were starting to trickle in. A custom bookshelf for a young couple. A rustic coffee table for a single mother who wanted her kids to have something sturdy to grow up around. With each delivery, I felt a little spark. Not just pride, but connection. These pieces were part of me, and I was building something real. One evening, while sanding down a chair, I caught myself humming. It startled me at first. When was the last time I had hummed without realizing it? The sound was so small, so unremarkable, but it felt like a victory proof that joy was seeping back into me in quiet, ordinary ways. Sometimes memories of Ryan still flickered. The night at the gala, the sting of humiliation, his voice at my door pleading. But instead of reopening wounds, those memories reminded me of distance. Like looking back at a storm you've already outrun. He was part of my past, a chapter I had read, endured, and closed. And I was the author of everything that came next. Friends began to notice. "You seem different," they said. "Stronger, happier." And they were right. I no longer measured my worth against someone else's validation. I no longer saw myself as reliable in the way Ryan once sneered. I was reliable, yes, but I was also creative, determined, and free. One night as I sat on my balcony again, city lights flickering below, I thought about love, about whether it would ever find me again, and if I even wanted it to. The truth was, I didn't have an answer, and for once I was fine with that, because love was no longer the missing piece I was desperate to fill. I was whole already. And maybe, just maybe, that was the lesson all along. Sometimes losing someone isn't the tragedy you think it is. Sometimes it's the beginning of finding yourself. I leaned back in my chair, let the night breeze brush against my skin, and smiled. Peace. Quiet, steady, beautiful peace. And I wasn't going to let anyone take it from me.